Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is Jason Partenza at the Wilton Soccer Association, and joined here by Coach Brian Wiese of Georgetown University. And really grateful and honored to have him spend some time with us through what is a busy holiday season, as well as what we understand could be the kickoff very soon for a national championship defense run in the spring of 2021, which we're all looking forward to. Fingers crossed.
Yep.
But just to remind everybody of kind of the organizations here on our side, on the Wilton community side. Again, I lead the Soccer Association. It's a 501c3 nonprofit here in Wilton, and we offer sort of fun and competitive soccer to children of basically all ages in town. And then our co-sponsor is the Wilton Youth Council, which is a group that promotes the well-being of children through education and connections among the community and families in town as well. So again, we're excited to have Coach Wiese with us. We basically hope to cover like a range of things, from his experiences coaching soccer at an elite level, a national championship level, balanced by his further perspective as just one of us dads and a soccer dad to his own children and in his own right. So, again, I'm super excited. I think we have a list of about 10 questions, which probably we'll dive into some sub questions and follow up, but wanted to dive right in. But first, maybe you could give Coach a chance to say a quick hello and maybe start with just his background and his journey to Georgetown, and maybe starting with his own remarkable college soccer career sooner or earlier, I should say.
Remarkable is very generous, Jason. I appreciate that. Well, yeah, thanks for the opportunity to get on and talk soccer with you. This is fun. This is in these particular times, there's a lot of meetings and Zoom meetings, and it's for my profession's sake. We haven't been coaching our players earnestly since really last March. So this is few and far between when we get to talk soccer. So and then even just from working as a recruiter, you can't even sit down. I haven't been able to sit down at any games since that time, except for my own kids. You talk about like being a dad. So it's been good in that regard. My the soccer down here in the DC area has been hit or miss in terms of what we've been able to do when. But my youngest daughter, so I have just for some context, when you talk about sort of being a college coach and also being a soccer soccer parent, I've been at Georgetown since 2006, so going on to 15 years now as a head coach at Georgetown, and then I was an assistant at Notre Dame for 5 years, and an assistant at Stanford for 5 years before that, and then I've been a soccer dad for my youngest is a sophomore. My oldest is now playing in college as a sophomore. So I have a kid who's been through sort of the college sort of search and recruiting. She was lucky enough to be recruited, going through the recruiting process, which is really interesting to see from the parent side. Yeah. About the coach's side, really interesting to see that from the parent side, and enlightening in a lot of ways too. And then my unfortunately, my middle child, Ted, who's a senior now, just got accepted into Syracuse, and he applied early decision, so he can't undo that mistake. So now he has to go to Syracuse for college, which is something I got to keep a little more quiet. But so anyway, so he's not doing that as an athlete. But then my youngest is a sophomore, and she's playing soccer, and so we're going through that again. So. So I've got a lot of different sort of hats I can put on depending on where we want to go through with some of these questions. But my own personal career playing was I graduated from Dartmouth in '95, so I played from 1991 to 1994, and I often I talk about my experience as a player as being very formational for me as a coach, because I went through the whole thing, right? My freshman year, I didn't play a minute. I was a goalkeeper. I was a backup goalkeeper. Didn't play a minute. And my frame of mind at that time was great. I'm not ready. I wasn't like coming in and unhappy about not playing. I'm like, great, I could use the time. I'm fine with this. But I had that sort of backup role. And then my sophomore year, I played. I was lucky enough to play. I had another goalkeeper who was my same year, who was excellent. We were very different. But I felt very lucky that I was given the starting nod, but I was very inexperienced, conceded lots of goals. Actually, that team did really, really well. They won the league, and we got to the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament. We lost to Claudio Reyna's Virginia team.
Me
And
too.
yeah, right. A lot of people, sadly, a lot of people did. That was a heck of a good team. But like I kind of found my feet and sort of found my confidence. And then my junior year and senior year, I was a more established player. I was a captain my senior year, and so you kind of ran through a lot of the different ebbs and flows of a career and different weights of expectation and uncertainty and trying to figure out, are you good enough, and once you get to figure out, are you good enough, well, how good can you get, and then how much influence can you have on a program and teammates and peers. And so I have a lot of empathy for all of our players on our team, which I think does help me when I have conversations with each of our different players, because I've sat in their seat at one time or another, and have some sense of maybe what they're going through. So that's been helpful. But it was it was a I'd like to say that MLS not having started, I think I graduated in 95, so MLS started in 1996. I'd like to say that 1 year gap was really the reason why I don't have a 20-year pro career under my belt. But I'm pretty sure even if MLS was up and running, I'd still probably be right out of college and into something else, is my guess. So, but it shaped me in that I went through, and not to try to bore everybody with my bio on some things, but I went through and had a lot of injuries in high school. So I had knee injuries that prohibited me from playing. I was from Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is in the soccer hotbed, but I was I was a part of a very good team. So we were traveling a lot, playing a lot. And I played really through going into my freshman years, when I had a first batch of sort of knee issues, and wasn't able to play high school. Was able to play spring of club, and then I had more severe knee issues. It wasn't ACLs; it was a whole thing. But it kept me out for about 18 months at that point. So I missed all of my sophomore year of high school, missed um, half or almost all of my junior year of high school, and just got back into being healthy and fit and playing for the end of my junior year and then my senior year. So I only really played 1 year of high school soccer, and I count myself incredibly lucky that it found a path to playing college soccer from all that. But what it did do is it made me, when you have those situations, it made me appreciate when I wasn't able to play, how much I loved to play, how much I wanted to be on the game. And I really found myself into coaching. Like I fell into coaching everywhere I went. So even when I was injured, my physics teacher had a 9-year-old kid, and he's like, I don't know anything about soccer. Can you play, right? You coach my kid, right? My kid's team. So, when I was not able to play high school, I was still on the sideline. I would be coaching these 8-9-year-olds, having a great time doing that. And I coached my senior spring in college. There's a local club team up in middle of nowhere, New Hampshire, that it was a U15 boys team. It was like my first serious. I have to kind of think about practices and what am I doing with a team, but it was, they were looking for volunteers out of our team. It was run by the soccer office to sort of build the soccer community up in the Hanover, New Hampshire area. And it was like, yeah, I'll do that. It didn't even cross my mind that it would take a lot of time and energy and effort, but I had a really fun time doing that. And then I got to my first job out of college was in San Diego as an engineer, just doing boring engineering things. And I happened to run across a girls U17 club team, very competitive team, it turned out, that was using the park behind my apartment complex to practice. And I was just going for a jog, finished my jog, and I started talking to some parent manager. And then a week later, I'm coaching this U17 girls team from San Diego. Their head coach that they had happened to be leaving for Indiana like 2 weeks later. So suddenly I'm, it's just this stuff. And it just always seemed like a fun thing to do. And again, sort of to true to form, when I went to grad school at Stanford at the exact same time as my old coach, Bobby Clark, who's one of the great college coaches of all time. He's a Scotsman. He was taking over Stanford's men's team at the exact same time I happened to be going to grad school there. So he was like, oh, this is great. I could use some help. Do you want to coach the goalkeepers? And I was like, that sounds great. Everything was just something that was fun to do, to fill the time. And coaching more found me in those years than I was out sort of seeking it. But I was always really interested in doing it. I was always happy to jump in and do it. It's just a way of keeping around the game, I think. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was hurt for a lot of times. You when you're at that age, or to be honest, any age, when you're not able to play something, you really do sort of figure out how much you love something, or how it's not that big of a deal in your life.
When did you know you wanted it to be a career, though? Was it with that Bobby Clark assistant kind of position, or was it?
Yeah. It was always, even I love doing it, so and then when you get to Stanford, so you're suddenly you're recruiting, and you're doing all the practice, you're going to the games, you're sorting some other stuff out, and I was trying to figure out how to get a master's degree while I'm doing this, that, and the other. But it was I always really loved doing it, even at that time. But I was always like, well, I'm supposed to be designing shoes for Nike or sweat tops for something. I was going to be a product designer in the sporting world, and fortunately for the sporting world, I wasn't really good enough to be hired. I wasn't really hireable talent, because it was like a funny time in the market, and I wasn't such an exceptional sort of designer that they had to hire. So it was very easy for them to say, I think I'll pass. And
Jordan was selling enough shoes on his own.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it just kind of the timing of it all worked out. But I do remember I was working as an engineer for, I had done the thing, right? 2 years. I'd been coaching at the same time. I actually took the fall of 1998 off from everything. I was like, I'm done with my master's program. I'm going to get married to my wife in September of 98, which in retrospect was a huge mistake. You don't want your anniversary in the middle of a soccer season. But at that time I was going to be an engineer, I was thinking, but I took the semester off, or that fall completely off from getting a job, from anything, because all I wanted to do was coach with the Stanford team in the fall. It's like, I'm just going to do that. We're going to get married. Those are the two things I'm going to do. That's it.
So then you went from sunny Stanford to snowy South Bend.
Yeah, well, and that was the question, right? So when the top assistant left, Jeff Wheeler, who's the head coach out at Wesleyan, up in your neck of the woods there, he was a teammate of mine at Dartmouth, but he got an opportunity to take the head coaching position at Wesleyan, and that happened maybe a month into January of '99, when I had been doing an internship, and that was going to lead to a proper job within engineering with a design company in San Francisco, and it was great. I really liked it. But I remember Bobby called and said, "Hey, Jeff has left. What do you want to do? Do you want to be a coach? Because I would have you come in and be the top assistant in Stanford if you want to do that, or do you want to be an engineer?" And it literally took 2 to 3 seconds to be like, I really want to coach, right? And I do remember I had a conversation with the fellow who hired me at the design firm. It was really, still, as I say, it was just an internship. But I remember thinking, I was like, listen, I hate, thank you for this opportunity, but I'm gonna have to leave. I'd only been there for about a month. Says, I think this is something that I really like, and I think I could be pretty good at it. It kind of suits me and how and that was it. And so once you do that, then you have a very understanding wife, and there we go. That was it.
That's awesome. I want to come back to some of the kind of points you made on sort of coaching found you, and sort of you just sort of loved it, and things sort of working out, some degree of serendipity in it as well. It sounds like, just in terms of right place, right time, and the right kind of connections over the course of your life. But I think there's something in that I'd like to follow up on, in terms of how you think about players and how some of your players have evolved into you surprised by one that you found versus another that I've heard you talk about before. You spend all your time trying to recruit this player, but then he goes somewhere else for whatever reason, but then you end up with this other player, and it's an amazing player, and turns out to be a great kid and a great person, and all that stuff. Is a little bit of serendipity in the whole ecosystem that again, when sounds like when kids and players just sort of love what they're doing, they sort of find their lane and find their homes, which I'd love to come back to in the conversation when we start talking about players a little bit. But
yeah,
it sounds like you had some of that. I had some of that in my experience too, and I like to say Georgetown sort of found me. I was sort of writing letters to people all over the place, and not all over the place, just a few, not thinking it would get anywhere, and it's sort of found its way into somebody's mailbox, and somebody read it, and somebody turned around in the field and they were looking at somebody else, and next thing I knew, I had a phone call, which I never expected. So this sort of things happen all the time, it sounds like, but they're all fun stories.
Yeah, it's I mean, serendipity is a great word for it, and it's everywhere, right? I was just having a conversation with a recruit today who's, a Midwest kid, hasn't really been to campus, wants to get to campus. Um, and and I had the conversation. I said, listen, a lot of recruiting is a very fluid thing, and and because of those things, right? So who knows why kids pick things and that, but we really want kids that want to come to Georgetown, right? That sort of things happen, and we might fall in love with a player, and maybe that works, but maybe it doesn't. But if it doesn't work, I don't lose any sleep over someone that we really really wanted, because it just, as you say, it opens the door for someone else, and it's a self-selecting thing, right? So if you're okay with the fact that there's a reason why that one player didn't end up at Georgetown, there's a reason why we didn't get that kid. um, and there's also then a reason why created an opportunity for another kid. There's a reason why that kid did come, that this
Yeah,
other person did come. And as long as you're open to the fact that there's a limitless number of people out there. There's no soulmates for like a player in a program or what. There's limitless numbers of things that kids can be doing, and kids that we can be interested in, as long as we find the right kind of kid who's got the right moral compass and character, and has an intrinsic motivation, like loves the sport, wants to get better. As long as they have those pieces, they're gonna end up being really satisfying kids to work with, and they're gonna come through really well for you. So
yeah,
that and that's and that's a big piece to players and player development. Like you talk about like my three kids. It's really interesting when you separate the three of them. They're also different personality wise.
okay.
But as a parent, if I remove my college coaching hat and put on my parent coaching hat, when you observe um, how your kid plays, like every one of us takes a crazy pill usually when your kid gets involved in something, right? So you're sitting here and you're like, my kid is this, and the referees suddenly become horrible villains, and opponents can become problems, and your kid has to be starting, and she's the best player in the team. The coach is an idiot for not putting her in this. You lose your marbles, and then once you start talking about a different kid, you go back to being a normal person again. And so it's really hard. You lose perspective really quickly when you're dealing with your own kid. And I think that's maybe one of the hardest things, that we as parents have to manage, is managing expectations, and to be fair, managing our own expectations on what's going on with our kids. Because we've had some very different experiences with my two girls have gone through in two different clubs, and it's incredible the difference between the two clubs, and and the teams and everything else. But um, the pressure, the pressure that one of these kids felt was significant, and it was completely manufactured. There's no reason why they should have felt pressure to win this game at under 12, right? But if the parents wanted it so bad, and the way I always describe it is, and when you have a kid, especially the oldest kid always feels older. But when you're sitting there, you're sitting saying, "Man, this game is vital. There's a U14. This
Hmm.
is a huge game. They have to win this game." And then the game happens. They win, they lose, whatever. And then a year later or 2 years later, you're like, oh man, remember when they were 14 and how we thought that was a big deal? But it really wasn't a big deal. They're only like 13, 14 years old. But this game, now that they're 15, this game really matters. This is a huge deal. We got to win. We have to win this. And every year you look back, and you're always able to look back and say, remember when we thought that was a big deal? It really wasn't that big a deal. But when you're in the time, when you're in it, it's very, very
Yeah,
hard for some people to separate and have perspective. And then that creates pressure, and that creates, and the thing is the kids feel it. Your kids
yeah,
feel that stuff too. And so what I will say is, like, when I did it, so my son, he was in like this, the high competitive level of a team at like U8 or U10 or something like that. And I was able to sort of sit back in that game at U10, listen to the parents going bananas, and be like, this isn't for my kid. My kid doesn't need that. That's not how he's wired. My daughter, she was wired for that. Like, she wanted to be playing with the best team she could find. My son, he just wanted to play with buddies. And so it was it took me a little time to be able to take a step back and be like, I don't need to push him harder to be better at this and take him out in the backyard. And like, he'll either have that, push himself or he won't. And so, I think I was able to say, all right, hey, let's take you out of this and let's put you in with your buddies playing a totally terrible level of soccer, but you're having a great time with it. And that's what he did for years. And it was perfect. It was the right fit for him. And then my youngest is different. Like she kind of, I wasn't sure which way she was going to go. And she sort of selected in a way herself. She wanted to go into a little bit more sort of serious competitive thing, but she could have gone any direction she wanted. And then it fell in for her that way. And it's the right fit for her. She loves going to practice, and that's the one thing about all three of the kids, no matter what the level is, they loved going to practice. And at the end of the day, they didn't come back frustrated. They weren't crying because they were stressed, or Ted wasn't upset because it wasn't good enough. It was just like, that was great. It was the right fit. And I think we got really lucky with that as parents.
Yeah. What I want to get back to the program stuff, the higher level stuff, but we're on the youth topic. So like, how do you make sense of the youth landscape these days? And like you mentioned, basically two sides of polar opposite, perspectives there, like more relaxed with your friends and a hyper competitive, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's confusing and it's crazy. How do you sort of make sense of that as both dad and and college coach, and sort of, is there or should there be some sort of better way out there? Like, or maybe a better question is sort of like, what are the programs that what are the qualities of the programs that you admire that sort of kind of do it well from a youth perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's the landscape is so convoluted right now because of COVID. The DA, right, academy teams, that whole thing has undergone a total sort of upheaval, and some teams went to an ECNL format, some teams went to this MLS and Next, I think they call it, and so that whole landscape has changed some things. And are some of these leagues going to say you can't play high school? They can play it's all kind of happened during COVID in a way that if you asked me to sort of sit down at the best game, in a tournament, I wouldn't even know where to think about starting, just because everything's going to really start from square one in this way. Like us discovering the landscape of recruiting that's relevant for us is going to be, going to take us some time again once we're able to get up and running. So the NCAA has what they call a dead period, right, for recruiting. Usually we get 3 days of a dead period a year. That's it, around the national letter of intent, when we're signing players to joining the school as seniors. They get 3 days where we're not able to see kids play or have them on campus or anything like that. Now, right now, it's been since March, and then they've already they've extended it to April 15th. So it's going to be 13 plus months of a dead period where we can't see anybody play. So it's kind of an interesting time. If you're an older kid, if you're a senior, it's been really tough because we can't see kids in person, and that matters a lot to see people play in person. But I think the clubs, the clubs that do it right, it starts just with really good coaching at the end of the day, right? And I think the clubs that I feel do the best job of really what it's about is they just have good people running it. So if you have good organization, you have good coaching, and the kids are enjoying it, right? And they attract good players, and the level gets better and better, and it just those things kind of self-feed,
Yeah.
And it's just really hard because to be honest, the teams that really do it right are able to separate the parents off. I think people have different philosophies of that, where some people really want parents involved, and it becomes sort of a joint thing, which some people can pull off really well. But at the end of the day, parents 9 times out of 10 make things worse. Because they'll have opinions. They don't think a good coach is actually a good coach, or they'll have their kid should be doing this, or they should be. They'll watch practice, and then they'll drive home with their kid and complain about what happened in practice, or they'll watch a game and they'll complain about something, right? And versus the ones where I think the best clubs out there have a strong organization, and they have good coaches, and the parents trust that, right? And
Right.
so and the kids then are the ones who are really the one who in the process. They're the ones who are saying practice was good or practice
Yeah.
wasn't good today. They're the ones who are saying the game was great. You know, I played well today. I didn't play well today. Versus being told by mom and dad that they played well today or they didn't play well today. Like those are the things where it's really hard to do. But those are the clubs that I think get it right at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
That's helpful. Maybe we could shift back to sort of Georgetown, because I think a lot of what you do at Georgetown, because you run a program and you run a great program, obviously, at a great place, and you've happened to win a bunch of games, which has been impressive and fun to be a part of and watch. But when you got to the program, like what were your goals, and maybe before the goals, what were the sort of foundational things you said you kind of knew you needed to kind of have a long run and a quality program?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, right? Because I remember when I first got out to to Georgetown in probably March or in February, March of '06. Um, my family stayed back in Indiana because the kids wanted to finish their sort of elementary schooling for that year. Then they were going to come out in I think May, so when they ended up coming out eventually. And it was an interesting time because it literally didn't have enough hours in the day, right, for me to think about. You come into a team and you want to sort of run things how you want to run them, so you have to sort of take everything and sort of look at it and analyze it and see like what do you like, what do you want to do different, and then finding the right people, right? So um, I didn't, to be honest, I don't think I came into the job with a list of, all right, I want to line up this and make sure I get this right. It just was like, I just knew how I wanted all the pieces to work. And it was just like, all right, how do I start getting that? And I think that the challenges I had is I wasn't patient enough early to be okay with like,
Mm.
doesn't all have to sort of get put in place at once. Right. I probably should have been more patient with myself with just even the non-soccer stuff, like all right, how are we going to set up our recruiting, what are we going to do for fundraising, how are we going to but it comes down to um you know it's funny when I think back about on what I was like as a coach. I took the job, I was 32, it was my first head coaching job. I had a good blueprint in my head, but you're still trying to like learn on the fly with like how do you make the decisions on what's right, what's wrong, and what you want and how it's going to go. And the reality is a lot of people forget it's like the first 2 to 3 years were results wise really lean on wins. Like we didn't win a lot. um, and that was really hard because my mentor Bobby Clark, everywhere he went he won right away. So he went to Stanford, and they didn't make the NCAA tournament, but they should have their first year. And then they were number one in the country for a little bit the next year, right? You're like, okay, and I was part of that, and you're like, okay, I see how that works, and you're going, and then we went to Notre Dame together, and it's the same thing. His very first year, they're in the NCAA tournament, and then I don't think they missed the tournament and you're like, okay, and then you get to Georgetown, and I was like 6-11 my first year, so I'm like, well, wait, hold on a second, like I thought I kind of understood how to do it, and you're looking at it, and you say, well, here's these players. They're not all my style of players, but they're good players, right? And they're good kids. They want to win. And so, what do you do with that? Like, how do you set up a system that you want to put in place that you sort of make the players sort of understand, or do you sort of look at it and say, well, these are the players we have, and let's sort of make it work for the group we have. And I made the decision that I really wanted to put a structure in place, and it didn't really fit the players we had at all. To be honest, we had all sorts of guys who were trying to fit around peg in a square hole, but was like, listen, that's just the best peg we have for that hole, so let's put that peg there. Looking back, I should have been much more pliable with that, but I also knew how I wanted to play, and so I thought if you took the long lens, then you can take these players, and they may not be perfect fits for what we're asking them to do, but over time, those kids as seniors say will be really good at teaching the freshmen the system. They'll know the system. You're not, and there's a lot of value in that. And what we've become since is is our teams all feel very similar, but we've been much more malleable with like, well, this is maybe the best system to fit the players that we've recruited and brought in. And I know we want to play this way, but we're maybe a little, let's not force that so much. But let's still keep the tenets of what we are, like pressing team, a team that wants to value the ball. And we're going to, there's still a very much of a, what I would call a Georgetown style to it. And it just took some time, but I think that the thing that if I were sort of looking back on and advising myself, I would say just make sure you're doing a good job getting the best staff together as you can. Make sure, because it's a small group. Coaches, college coaches, there's myself, 2 assistants, and a volunteer assistant. That's it. There's 4 of us coaching, and that group. And then there's an athletic trainer and a strength coach, and those people, they're all kind of that coaching group. Just make sure you have the right people there. And I was very lucky. I have very, very good people. I've always had very good assistant coaches. Even in 06 and 07 when we were 6 and we were not winning a lot. I had really good people who were working on it and understood what we were trying to do and were patient but A, it makes the job fun when you have people you like, and B,
Yep.
if you have good people, they're working really hard to try to do the right things and to bring the right kids in and everything else. But I think it took us a couple years to find the niche for us to be really to kind of take it to a level where we're going to compete for the Big East, to win the Big East, to try to get to the NCAA tournament, and try to win some games in the NCAA tournament, to get to a college cup at some point, right? To win a national championship at some point. Like, how do you find those kids? And I think it took us a little bit of time to figure out that niche, right? Which for us is very much that I-95 corridor, right? So here's what I found with Georgetown, right? That I-95 corridor, really between DC, you can go a little bit south, but if you venture into Virginia, if there's so many damn good schools down there that are in-state, there's UVAs and VCUs and JMUs and like there all these MUs are and there's tons of them. And there's tons of them.
Yeah.
So like, they're in state, they're cheap and they're good. And so you can get those kids, but you have to work really hard for a Virginia kid. You have to, same reason, you have to work very hard for a North Carolina kid. But if you go from DC and just drive straight north to Boston,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of schools like Georgetown, right? Duke is very similar, right?
Yeah.
Notre Dame's very similar. Northwestern's very similar. Stanford. There's not many schools like Georgetown between us and Boston. BC gets kind of close to it.
Yeah.
But we have that Ivy League kind of pedigree, but it's got scholarships and it's got a little bit more of a sports sort of culture to it, maybe not a national level when you get the basketball. And so everybody that lives in that corridor knows Georgetown, right? So if we can find a kid that's a good player, that's a good enough student, and we present Georgetown, mom and dad know what that is. And mom and dad will say, kid, you're looking at that. It may not be the right fit, but you're certainly going to look hard at it. Whereas if you go to the Midwest or the West, like they'll know Georgetown, but mom and dad may need to be educated about like what it is. But that 95 corridor, which by the way, has a ton of kids in there. Turns out there's a lot of people that live in
New
DC,
Jersey,
Baltimore,
New York, and Connecticut. Yeah.
and New York and New Jersey and Connecticut. There's a lot of soccer, a lot of really good soccer that's played in there. So that's where we really started getting into our happy place with finding the right kids who really wanted to be pro soccer players but weren't going to be leaving early because they understand they're getting a special degree too.
Yeah, Brian, what about sort of at the university or administrative level, just sort of the alignment and the culture and the team around you there, just sort of buying into what you're doing and the transparency that you provide them and those sort of things that are maybe prerequisites to on the field. Is that a big part of the time you spend, or just things you don't have to worry about because it's there?
Yeah, no, it's we're an interesting place because Georgetown is, we have so many sports. We have 30 sports. It's a lot of sports. We don't have big time football contract money to pay for all those sports. We have basketball. And so the university has to make some decisions about what sports are they really going to try to be competitive at in a national level. And fortunately for us, the Big East and Georgetown have made decisions that they want to try to be good in soccer, men's, women's soccer. And fortunately for us, it's translated to, we've been to 2 college cups, or women have been to 2 college cups in the last 8 years. And so it's translated to some success on the field, but it's still at its core, it's a little more mom and pop shop than that too, right? We don't have a huge amount of support. We have to work very much in lockstep with men's and women's lacrosse, women's soccer, and field hockey and football to figure out when we're going to train together off of, we have one turf field that we have to be allocated. We have our grass game field, but we all share this one field, and so we have to make concessions all the time. I mean, we've had practices where women's field hockey's got half the field and we're on the other half, and it's just that's okay, right? It's just
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we need to. They needed to finish a practice, and we needed to start a practice, and we kind of worked out ahead of time, and away you go. And so not getting worked up about what you have or what you don't have, and we need this. It's like we're all sort of fighting the same fight, and your support staff, your facility staff, like we just they all need help, and they all need if you're walking around and being really high maintenance about what you have to have here, then everywhere, it just doesn't work at a place like Georgetown. You have to understand that these kids need time away from they have to, once you're off from practice, they gotta do schoolwork, and they gotta go to class, and
yeah,
they gotta have social time, and our team more and more of late at least has gotten into more, they want to be doing some things around the community, like, so they're interested in they think they understand, they're good ambassadors, and so this is all really healthy things for these guys. But I think we have a president in Jack DeJoya that understands the value of athletics. The reason why we have 30 varsity athlete our teams is because he understands that is from a individual growth mechanism. One of the most important things you can do for a person is to put them in a competitive division one team is unbelievable experience for people. And then we have an AD that's the best AD I've ever worked with, Lee Reed, who um, you know fits all these pieces together, right? And supports us like crazy, but is one of the most competitive ADs you'll ever see at the same time, right? So
yeah,
he gets so excited when it goes well, but when it doesn't go well, he's not storming in the office and upset. He gets it, right? It's sport.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you just have people who all really look out for each other, and it is, and I think we all recognize that we have to work together in this particular space to make it work at all, right? And
yeah,
I think that's it's a really good group of coaches that we are. All the coaches of all these sports. I think we all kind of recognize that, and it's a good group. And that's not there's no guarantees that that's always going to be the case.
yeah. Maybe I could lump these two questions together. Kind of jumps off of what you just said. You've had a lot of great teams. Like, what makes a really great team? You have great players, obviously, on almost every team. But what makes these teams gel into great teams, in your opinion?
It's very cliche, right? But it's when guys don't care about who's scoring the goal, they don't care about who's starting or who's coming off the bench. They enjoy each other, right? So the best teams we have are the teams that when you see them on campus, it's just they're all together on like at the dining hall, or they're all walking together to get something from Wise Millers, or they're all going like they just like being together, right? And
Yeah,
and I think we had a sense that our last team, that the 19 team that won the national championship, it was like in 2018 when you're like, well, this could be a really fun group because you saw how close they were, not because like how good they were, it was like how close they were. And that stuff really manifests, and we if we got something right in 2019, it was that we recognized that we had a group of guys that were very close. We had a group of guys that are very talented. Um, but as soon as we started trusting everyone to do their job, and they kind of followed through on that, they were all rooting for each other. There was never, they were always a little disappointed if they weren't starting and they were used to starting, or they maybe got fewer minutes. I mean, that's that you can't, human nature has that ingrained. But you know, we we had a lot of different starting lineups, and we never, you know, we would instinctively take a training session and always shuffle the starters with each other. We wouldn't have a starting team against a reserve team because we really believed that we didn't have starters and reserves. We just had good players. And for this team, we'd put this group out because we thought that was maybe the right group to start. But then the group that came on frequently gave us what we needed to win the game. It was our reserves that frequently came on and helped us. And it was our starters who'd be the first people cheering like crazy for our reserves in critical moments because they recognized that they were doing a job. And it, I think when you have a group that inherently likes each other, that roots, like genuinely roots for each other, that kind of chemistry piece, right? That comes from leaders, that comes from your older guys and everything else. But that chemistry piece, it always supersedes the talent. Always. If you have really talented kids and players, but they're sort of looking out for A1, that those teams always fall by the wayside. They underachieve. And then the teams that really have the right chemistry and kids that pull for each other, they always overachieve. And whatever that is, whatever that ends up being.
Yeah. I wonder if you could comment just about how hard that is to create at the youth level. Like, it's so hard, I find, because the kids get all moved around so much, and there's always another team, another something to play for, to strive for, that there's never that sense of playing for the team as much as maybe there used to be these days. But you really see it sort of happen more naturally in these maybe high school environments or college environments, where you're playing again for something, a logo you selected, a team you selected, a university you selected. And there's something bigger than that, than yourself in that equation. That's really hard to replicate at the youth level, I find, because of just so much movement and options and, hyper competitiveness that happens. But it's something that I feel like if it could be there, you'd have, a lot less stress on kids, and they just inherently enjoy that experience. So your middle son you described just likes to play with his buddies, right? Like that's important. Can you have that experience, but also a competitive experience, where you play with friends who become great friends and be very competitive. It seems like the world has separated those two at the youth level for some reason.
Yeah, they have, and it's too bad. Jason, I think you and I are part of an era of very different. Like we're sort of a dying breed, right? Whereas you got on a team and you were with that team for 12 years, and then you went to college, right? And it's sad because it's true, that there's something about a group of players that have been together since U8 and they're now U18 that is a lost experience a lot of times now. And fairness, again, I'll go back to it. I mean, parents can wreck that sometimes. Parents get upset about playing time at age 10. Parents get upset about development of this and the other. And then kids start going off to greener pastures. And it feels more mercenary, right? There's kids who are playing with this team, and then mom and dad will move to a different state to play with that team here. Like that kind of stuff happens like with regularity now. So, it's true. High school, you're high school, and you go to college, and it's not that you don't have a choice, but you're kind of there, right? It's just not as easy and straightforward to be like, well, I don't like this team, I'm just going to move to that one. Kids transfer, but it's hard suddenly. Like that's not as easy a thing as just to move from thing to thing. But it's almost the ability, the fact that they have to sort of more or less be at that high school, regardless of how good or bad they are, is a really kind of a healthy thing, right? They got to kind of figure it out and persevere. And it is something that I think I don't know what the solve is to it, Jason. To be honest with you, I don't know what the solve is, but it could solve that. So clubs could stay more. A core of players really do travel together from U8 to U9. Those are really strong bonds. I'm really tight still with my kids, my club buddies that I played from middle school through high school with. We still talk all the time, and those are really long enduring friendships because of that.
Yeah. Well, it probably goes back to just your points about great programs, right? Great programs will keep people together and develop more kids to some degree. But
the program can be at fault too. Sometimes they're always looking for their next great player. Like sometimes it's the clubs that are pulling in the kids. And then what happens? You pull in too many kids, so you have to push out kids on the other side, or put them to the team, or make it. And that becomes an environment which sometimes the parents can create, and sometimes the club can create, or sometimes parents and the club can do it. But I always have a lot of time and appreciation for the club coach that's like, we're going to add this kid, but that's it, because we're not going to lose anybody, right? Those are the fun teams. Those are the teams you want to be part of.
Yeah. All right, just a few more, Coach, because I know we're running up on our time. But how have you sort of just managed through this environment? I mean, it have been a crazy year. And what have you sort of leaned on to kind of get through it in terms of either the program or the culture or the whatever it's been? And hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel for you here, getting back to the field. But
Yeah.
have you managed through?
It's not gonna be any different than anybody else in your groups or families doing things. It's been really hard, right? It's been, I think, mentally very taxing. It's draining mentally because it's so new and so uncertain, right? So like my brain likes to relax on routine, and there's nothing routine about the situation. So trying to figure out that has been tough. But I think the kids. My biggest priority is like, how do we keep our players in a good mental place, right? And so I lean on my staff. We've been doing Zooms, without, and then also trying to be aware of like, well, we don't want to fatigue them through Zoom, because you got to remember they're on Zoom all day for class. So adding a Zoom meeting, which is the only way you can really do a proper meeting, is good and bad, right? That's the thing you have to recognize. Like that Zoom meeting on the Sunday night, where we did pretty regularly through the fall, was good and bad because they missed each other. But then it's like we're on the Zoom again, right? Their eyes are starting to get hard to glaze over. So
Yeah.
but we also relied on them to handle each other. Like they were good with getting their group. They would be working on staying connected themselves remotely. But it kind of goes back to, in a way, and we're still in it, so I don't know, right? But this is what I'm surmising is it kind of goes back to when I was talking about my time in high school, when I had these knee injuries and I wasn't able to play. It made me really appreciate and be so grateful for the time when I was able to play again. I think we'll have a lot of that. Um, I think we'll have these moments of just saying this is something that we're not going to take for granted for a while, right? We're going to really appreciate the time together. We're going to appreciate what this is, because it was taken away from them for the better part of a year. And when you're dealing with guys like our team, who they're not like Ted, who wants to play with their buddies. It's all they want to do is play soccer, and they want to do it at the highest possible level, and they would rather do that than anything else. Anything else, like if they were going to remove one element of their lives, that's the last one they're going to remove. When you're told you can't do that for a year, it's really, really tough. And I think you'll get a group that is, I think this will apply to everybody, guys who are remote learning for high school, when they come back to in-person learning in high school, when you're able to get your club stuff really properly up and running, it, the same thing is going to apply. I think everyone will appreciate the things about that, the interaction, the human interaction, that those that are so critical to those things. That I mean, I know I'm absolutely over the moon excited about our January 11th, when our guys are coming back in. I'm so excited to see everybody, right, and get working, get thinking again that way. So,
do you think that's the positive that comes out of this? Is just a appreciation for it all?
I think so, right? There's things that'll come. We'll have the Zoom element's never going to go away from our lives. Like we'll always be Zooming moving forward, which is I think a really good thing. In time, it'll be like, oh, this is better than what it used to be like. But when you don't have to Zoom all day, it's getting on Zoom would be kind of fun at some point again, right? But it's I think for almost all of us, even me, just going into the office and being with my staff in the office and going and walking past our administrators and our facilities guys in the hall, like those things are things you just desperately miss right now. And I think you'll really appreciate all of those elements of the nuances of these jobs, and the nuances of being a student in high school, the nuances of being in college. I know Georgetown hasn't had everybody, like campus hasn't felt like Georgetown since March, right? So next August, when hopefully you got 7,000 plus students back on campus, and that energy is like that energy, I think you'll understand what's been missing once it reappears again. And I think that's something that's going to be really healthy.
Yeah. So sort of to wrap this up, if we could, for your benefit and your evening's benefit, but you know, you obviously pulled off, for us alumni, the greatest accomplishment ever by winning the national championship last year. I mean, besides obviously, hoisting a trophy and seeing that ridiculously amazing ring, like what was what was the most satisfying about that? And do you think about that as sort of the culmination of doing a lot of things right for a long time, or um, um, moment in time, great team, like lightning in a bottle type stuff? That how do you think about that experience and sort of your journey there? In terms of all we've talked about tonight, and just um, thinking about the continuation of that into the future. Is it?
It's a
I,
little it's a little bit of both. It really is a little bit of both because it's even when you think back to my first years, my 06, 07, those teams that were 6 and 11, there's still elements of us learning and going through and building on that translated to the 2010 team, which had the first Big East championship run, which then got the guys used to winning to go through. But from 2012 up through 2019, bar 1 year in there, in that 8-year window. So 7 years, we had a team that could have maybe done the same thing, right? And good players, maybe some bad coaching in there to sort of stop us when we could have gone farther. But we went to a national final in 2012. We had an Elite Eight, experience where we got Virginia, found a way through us. When we had a really, really good team in 2014, we're 30 seconds away from going to another Final Four, and they tie, and then they go through on penalties. And then in 2015 was maybe the best team I've had in terms of a starting group of 11. I think 10 players from that 2015 team were drafted into an MLS team. It's amazing talent in that group. And they only got to a Sweet 16. Like that team should have been in maybe a national championship as well. And then, but they all sort of build on each other. And we say this all the time, which is the 2012 experience for me personally as a coach so shaped the 2019 decisions, how we went about mentality of that weekend, that the 2019 result may well not have happened, probably wouldn't have happened without the 2012 team being in that same situation before. And what we learned in that 2012 experience was so important for understanding what we were getting into in 2019, that it's those things. And I remember sending a note to all the 2012 guys after the 2019 team saying, like, I don't think we would have won if it hadn't been for you guys. And those guys are like 7 years, 8 years removed from that current group. And that's that linkage is very real. And that was an easy thing to sort of link through. But every team has its ripple on effect from the whole thing going forward. So, I think the things that were really most sort of satisfying for me was, three levels for me really, which one is our team, our that like bubble of our team, our players, our close support staff, coaches, just to see that, how hard they work, and what good people, I mean, just what a wonderful group of people they were, not just soccer players, just great kids, and to see it work for them was really satisfying. Right. And then, the next sort of layer for me was the number of people that just do so much for everybody. But I know how many people were doing all the little bits and bobs for our team along the way and rooting for us. And then the president of the university had come down for the final. Like, it mattered to him that we won. You see the students celebrating in the Healy Student Center. They're watching during finals. They're watching the game and the penalty kick shootout. We win you see that the students were going crazy, and you see how mmany students were there cheering you on. They had no idea where they're cheering you on, but they wanted to be part of that. That's the stuff where you're so happy for the people. I was just very happy for everyone that they got that sort of satisfaction and got to take part in something like that. And then the really fun part, you talk about the alums we had. We were on the field for an hour after the game, not because we were sort of celebrating, but because we had so many people who were wanting to celebrate with us. And the alums bum rushed the security, and they wanted to celebrate just as much as our players did. And I think it was, for me, I didn't coach obviously that whole group. You know, you had Coach Tabasnik had a 22 plus year era
Yep.
of players, and then, you know, I have what, 15 years, you know, it's about 30, 40 years worth of players, and they were all, it didn't matter, right, what year you were an 80 something, a 90 something, a 2000, you were on the current team. It was just Georgetown people,
Yeah.
that were genuinely, and I get excited about it. I mean, just, it was, everyone was so excited about being a part of that sort of Georgetown soccer family, that that left a really powerful mark on our current players, right? And
Yeah.
you know, I think they, you know, it's just one of those things, they recognize they're just a part of this link, that they
Yeah.
did something that let everybody come together and celebrate together.
Yeah.
That was pretty special.
Yeah. All right, here's my last question, and it's going to hopefully doesn't take more than a few minutes. But
Depends on the answers. My answers go long.
so if you had to give, you know, one piece of advice to three different constituents, someone trying to run a program and do it really well at any level,
Mhm.
what would be the one or two things you'd tell them to do? A parent, you know, who wants to support their child in soccer or any sport, what would you tell them to do? And then a player who's passionate about soccer, hopefully, but maybe any other sport, you know, at a young age, maybe, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, 13, you know, that kind of age bracket where, you know, they're still trying to figure things out. You know, what would you sort of say to each of those constituents as, you know, kind of a little bit of advice, but obviously
Cliff note
the,
advice.
the Cliff Note version of, you know, if you had a phrase to hang on each of those constituents, what would it be?
Oh boy. Okay. Well, if I can't remember the three things,
We can also stop recording and do it again if we need to. So
you know, if you're running an organization, you're putting together a club, you're sort of, by far the most important thing to do is get the right support people around you, get the really good people that understand your vision, understand what you want to do, that are going to work, and that you want to spend time with, right? So there's nothing worse than having a group of 3 or 4 people and you just don't really like hanging out with one of them. Not that they, you know, they can understand everything that you want about this, that, and the other, but they're not fun, or they're not like, get fun people, get people that you resonate with, that you want to show up and to go to work with, you want to show up and go to battle with. They're going to have your back when things get hard. Find the right people to surround yourself with. Huge. That is it. That's 100% easy. If you're a parent, um, drive your kid, drop them off, do something else, pick them up, ask them how they was, did they have fun, how was that, great, super, you know. And just read your kid. Don't project your own neuroses on what's going on. Just let the kids show up, and if the kid's having a great time, keep taking them. If they're not enjoying it, take them somewhere else. Pretty simple, right? But let the kid tell you that one way or the other. So, you know, the more you can allow that your son or daughter to breathe in that space, and do it without the parental pressure, the better it's going to be for them long run, right? So and if they have or develop intrinsic motivation, it's probably not going to be because you provided it. Something else is going to spark that. Like that's likely the case. And for the young player, if there's any way that you can find a friend or a peer that also loves the sport as much as you, so that you two are going to pop off on a Saturday and just play yourselves, or going to go out to a field yourselves, or make up a game with it yourselves, that's the single best thing you can do. So it's hard to do right now, but if you can find somebody, you know, and the reason I say that is you know, I grew up, my older brother was why I played soccer. He was 4 years older than me, and we grew up in New Mexico. Not a lot of, you know, teams out there and coaches to do that, who knew what they're doing at that time. But he found a friend who was ended up being a year older, who loved soccer. And so what did they do? They went out every day with a ball and they would juggle together. They passed. They just played soccer every day because they liked each other, and B, they liked soccer. And so they played a ton of soccer. And they would go and they would juggle. They were getting into, they get up to like 2,000 juggles shared with each other. Like that. There's not much to do in New Mexico, I guess, but that was what they did. And then they need someone to shoot down. So they pull me into goals, and I would stand in there and they'd be smacking balls in my backyard, you know, at me. And but they found each other, and they had that common bond of just loving the sport. And it can be tennis, it can be golf, it can be anything. It doesn't matter what you were doing, but for them it was soccer. One ended up going to be a captain at UCLA, and the other was a captain at Dartmouth. Right, and it's just because, of course they were, right? They played too much soccer over their lives not to be awfully good at it. And so, if you can do the same thing, you can find a good team. You go, make sure you really enjoy what you're doing. But the best thing you can do is find that partner, one way or the other.
Yeah, cool. All right, Coach. Thanks so much for all the time and the perspective and the fun stories. We'd love to continue the conversation, but maybe we'll let you get to a season and do your thing. And good luck in 2021. And we're hoping to see the team back on the field and soccer generally get back in the swing.
Yeah, good luck to us all in 2021, right? Let's hope we got a collective.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's get this thing going again.
Exactly. I can't wait for some games on campus. So thanks again.
Yeah.
Have a good night and Happy New Year.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. All right.